Excellent. All right, top of the day to everybody. Today is April 21st, 2020. And we are excited to have everybody together. We have a packed 90 minutes this morning that is going to center around putting your playbook together for coming back online. We realize that that's going to happen at different times for different parts of the country. So all varying things going on. And at some point, everybody's going to be back online. So we thought now would be a good time to start that conversation and the prep. So I'll have some comments about that. Again, you're welcome to put any questions in the chat box. We'd ask you to reserve it for that. So we don't have two different seminars going on during the conversation. So you're welcome to put any questions and we'll address those as we go along. So a couple of just quick updates based on what we've talked about in past sessions. Quick update on the Paycheck Protection Program. Everybody's made different decisions on that. And where it sits now, if you've decided to participate in that and either have the funding or it's on its way, based on all the interactions that we have had and the data that's been gathered, the best word picture that has been given to me, which I appreciate very much, should put it in context, which is that program is kind of like the IRS code for doing your taxes. In other words, the federal government, the SBA, has come out with the guidelines. Then it is up to each individual recipient then to document the use of funds, the math that they used to arrive at their conclusion, and then they submit that to their bank. And then it's the bank's responsibility to come back and either refute it, ask additional questions, and then eventually to be the ultimate decision maker. But the burden of proof rests on, as my understanding, rests on each individual to keep track of it and then submit thorough documentation, just like your taxes, right? So that's the best word picture I've been given on that. If you've kept an eye on the email network, Crown Counsel email network, Bill Stuckey, who's a CPA and a resource partner, has done a great job of providing some ideas and some guidance that you can take and share with your CPA. So I'd encourage you to do that. It's some great resources, good stuff, and individual for each person. So I hope that helps. Number two is on, we get a lot of P's in this situation. So we just talked about the PPP. Now let's talk about PPE. So depending on what the situation is in your state, there's some that are looking forward to, opening back up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And having the proper protection equipment and everything is going to be an issue. We released yesterday on the Crown Counsel a source for masks, for KN95 masks that are supposed to be the same equivalent as a K9 or N95, and we're ordering those in bulk because that's the only way we can get them, and then we're divvying those up based on what everybody needs. So I'd refer you back to that if that's a need that you have. Crown Counsel is ordering those every day based on it's a 2-week turnaround time. And there's a movement afoot to find other things as well, gowns and gloves and all the other things that are in such short supply right now. So I'd point you in that direction. Steve Puffer, to your question about the whole aerosol question, we are going to dedicate Leadership Academy Session 8, which is next Tuesday, to all of the PPE and infection control issues. Here's our take on it right now. We're all waiting with anticipation with what the CDC is going to come out with and OSHA. And as things are moving forward here, our view right now is that there is no way that they're going to get granular enough to be able to deal with every medical situation. So what we're anticipating, and we may be wrong, is some general guidelines, and then it's going to become incumbent on every medical professional to come up with their specific protocol based on the general guidelines. So there's going to be this balance between doing the right thing and patient perception and making sure that there's a balance there, because I think there's going to be a lot that is going to be left up to each practitioner. So a lot's going to happen on that front in the next week, and we're going to dedicate our next session to it, to figuring out all of the things that are not mandated and what's the best balance. So encourage you to join us for that. That'll be next Tuesday at 11 o'clock Central Time. All about PPE, infection control, and that will be more of a discussion. There are going to be a lot of areas here where there is not clear-cut answers, and so we're going to facilitate kind of a mastermind discussion on that in terms of direction and what everybody can, what we can come up with. We shall see. All right, so with that, I hope that helps. Next thing, let me just kind of give you the context for our discussion today. We're going to cover 3 areas, which is setting the stage for coming back. We'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about some areas where you can copy genius in terms of things that have been done in other areas to come back strong. And then we're going to walk through the layout for your short-term playbook. So we've talked about the playbook concept for years, right? That every great team has a playbook, has a strategy, and we've helped you develop that over the years. This focus, we're going to go through 10 areas of playbook focus and what's important now, so that as you sit down with your team, you can have a specific area of focus in each of these 10 areas of what everybody needs to know right now that's important as you come back online. So get ready to take notes. Again, 10 different areas and some specific focus of what you might want to do there. Let me give you 2 word pictures real quick. I had this conversation just last week. And this was the best word picture that came out of that conversation is anytime your IT systems don't work, if you call IT, whoever your IT support person is, more often than not, the very first thing they have you do is just turn everything off and restart it, because it cleans out all of the stuff that's not supposed to be there. And 80% of the time, that fixes the problem. Now, rebooting a business is not something that we would choose to do. I don't think there's anybody here that would have chosen to go through what we're going through right now or what we've gone through in the last 30 days. Nobody would have chosen to do that. And it does create some interesting opportunities, not too dissimilar from a reboot. So what I'd like you to consider as we go through this is, if you were going to reboot your business, which we are in the weeks to come, then what are the things you want to do away with? What are the things you want to keep? And where do you want the focus to be? It will not be business as usual when we go back online. There are some things that are changing and will have changed. And so we hold that as you bring your team back online, that you can't just go back to work like you were when you left, that it merits some discussion, it merits some focus, it merits a playbook and some direction so that you come back in a stronger way based on the circumstances today. Now, as a context for that, I'm going to take you back to John Wooden. Everybody knows John Wooden, legendary coach at UCLA, one of the winningest coaches in basketball history. And one of the legendary things that he would do that his players talked about for decades after he quit coaching was that the first day of practice at the beginning of the season, he would start with teaching his players how to put their socks on and how to tie their shoes. And his whole philosophy was, if it's 2 minutes left in the game and we're down to the wire and we're just points away from winning and somebody's shoe comes untied, or if we're in the middle of the game and you can't play because you got a blister on your foot, well, that was a 100% totally preventable situation. So yeah, we're going to start with the basics so that an error in the basics doesn't stand in the way of winning. So in some of the areas that we're going to talk about today, yeah, it's going to be like tying your shoes. We've left nothing to the imagination. We're assuming nothing. So we are looking at this opportunity the same way as if we had been off. We were professional sports athletes and we had been off in the off season, and now we're coming back for preseason and getting started to come back into the season. There's never been anything quite like this in terms of team members not working, you're not working, the whole deal. So we think it merits some ramp up, some thought, some consideration about how we're going to bring everybody back on board, what the playbook needs to be, and how we're going to do it. So here's the 10 areas that we are going to talk about this morning. First, we're going to talk about revisiting your vision and your values. In a time of uncertainty and crisis, what we all want is something that we can count on. And so part of this discussion is to revisit with your team what you believe in and what really matters. Because operations may be a little bit different, but what you believe doesn't change. And we all need to revisit that. Culture. So what are the cultural things that you're committed to, even in a potentially different environment? What are you going to maintain as far as your culture is concerned? What are your goals? The goals moving forward may be a little bit different than they were 30, 60 days ago. So how are you going to address that? How do you talk about it? Team accountability. We'll spend just a few minutes on this. We had a whole session on this a couple of sessions ago. The point being is that the temptation from a scheduling standpoint is going to be to throw out, we don't have time for meetings. We don't have time for all those things we used to do. So we're just going to schedule patients and go, go, go. And we are taking the opposite view, is that accountability and connectivity is going to be more important than ever. And that accountability takes place in your meeting structure. So we'll talk about that and what that needs to look like. Team management, and what are the key areas of focus there? Your clinical systems and where you're going to focus there, because there's some systems that are going to change. Your marketing, what's the messaging that you're going to be sending out now? Your business systems and where that focus needs to be. Your patient service, what's the balance and where is your focus going to be? And then finally, your financial management. So we are going to touch briefly on all 10 of those areas. And here's the design of this. This is not comprehensive. So this is with the short-term view in mind, is what does your playbook need to look like for the first 30, 60, 90 days, and where do you want your team's focus to be? So we'll hit all 10 of those areas. We're going to make some suggestions as far as where you might consider the focus to be, with the vision here that you're going to sit down with your team for a day, 2 days. I mean, you decide what the time period is before you start seeing patients. And you're going to go through this focus playbook to say, here's how we will play the game for the next 30 days, 60 days, until we get some, some stability and a better idea of where we're headed. So with that, as an introduction, and I'm going to mute everybody so the practice advisors can unmute when it's your turn. So we're going to start with vision and values. And Robin Tyson, from our practice advisor team is going to lead us through that discussion. So Robin, it is all yours.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so I'm going to first start by going through the different elements that we would recommend that you have in this section of your playbook. And then we're going to focus on what's important now, like Steve suggested. So one of the first things, obviously, is going to be your vision statement. So your vision statement is looking at what you want to accomplish, and it's meant to challenge and inspire your employees. So do you have a vision statement? The next section of that is your values, your core values. So those are the words that describe who you are, what you stand for, how your business runs, and those words are the glue that hold your organization together. The next element is your purpose, and this is the why behind your office. It's the fundamental reason of why your practice exists. So it's your purpose statement. And then the last element of that is the mission statement. So this is the general statement of how you're going to accomplish all of those different elements that we just talked about. So it's a statement of what your business does, for whom it exists, what it's intended to do in the near future. And oftentimes there's a clear finish line to this and a specific time frame that's addressed as a part of the mission statement. So you have those 4 elements of statements for your team. So your vision, your core values, your purpose, and then your mission statement. The next part of that group is the sustainability plan. And this is going to look a little bit different for every office, but how do you, as a leader, as a practice owner, how do you keep those 4 elements in front of your team? And how do you make sure that those vision stays in place, that those values stay in place? What is the focus each and every day to make sure that those are implemented? The next element of this is strategy. And in most cases, when we're talking about strategy, it has to do with expansion, your growth, or your exit strategy. And what we added for the time right now is, what's your reset strategy? That's going to be the 30, 60, 90 days. How does that look? And then the expansion, growth, and exit would come later. But right now, the most important thing is, what's your reset strategy? And then the last element of that is an organizational assessment. So there are, how do you know what your team feels about if you're living those things, if the vision, the values, and the purpose and the mission are on the forefront of everything that you do? How do you know that they guide the decisions that you make as a team? And so having that assessment and then an action plan for where areas that you're achieving and areas that you could be, that are opportunities. What is the action plan to get to turn that around and make sure that the vision, value, purpose, and mission are on the forefront of everything that you do? So those are the elements of that section. The win, or the what's important now as a team, what we talked about was that those values, making sure that you have those core values in place, that those are the words, that the glue that holds your organization together. Have those in the forefront of your team. Revisit them. Is every team member on board with that? And most importantly, when we go back, the focus is going to be so much around the PPE and the procedures and how we protect patients. The win right here is to make sure that none of the values or what your patient focus is gets lost in being over compensating for the PPE. Want to make sure that the purpose, the value, the vision, the mission are all in the forefront of how we take care of patients each day. So Steve, the vision and value piece, anything you would add?
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, Robin. So let me give you an example of how that might, let's see. Lou Vitangeli, I apologize. I need you to unshare your screen. You may not know how to do that. That was unintentional. I need to share my screen here.
You go to the bottom.
Yeah.
Lou, you can go to the bottom toolbar and then just click unshare screen, or at the very top, that red tab right there.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right. So here would be an example of this. Is as you look at your values that you have lined out in the past, one of the biggest issues coming back online is the emotional state of your team. This has got to be addressed first off. Now, in a previous session, we talked about the 5 stages of grief or change, right? So and I'll again review those quickly: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, right? We've gone through those before, and those continue to circulate. So the values thing is the first discussion. Where is everybody and what matters now? Now, in most of the service values that we have gone through with all of you, is in a lot of cases when we've developed those, safety has been the highest priority. In other words, patient safety, team safety, that's been the highest value and highest priority. So having a discussion about that is, okay, everybody's safety on the team is our highest priority. So how are we going to make sure we take care of the team so that we can take care of our patients? Then another value is patient care and comfort. So how do we balance safety with care and comfort so people feel taken care of, we maintain the relationship, and at the same time keep everybody safe? There's a balance, right, in terms of how you do that. So that's not just telling, but also discussion is, how do we move through this in a different environment so we still maintain good patient relationships and keep everybody safe? We're going to have a further discussion about that next week. So here would be the action item here. There's a lot of content here in terms of things that you can discuss. The idea of this is, what's important now? We call it when. What's important now? What do we need to focus on right now that is the highest priority in terms of our values? What are they, and how do we live those moving forward? So again, you don't need to talk about all of it. You can talk about some of it in terms of what's our focus right now, what do we believe in, and how do we make all that work? Okay, moving on. Section number 2 then has to do with your culture. And here is the prelude to this. Chris Taconis and Kelly Hemrich are going to talk about culture. And the idea of this is, you've spent years building your culture. A crisis does not mean that you abandon your culture. The crisis should build it. So revisiting with your team what your culture is and what you are going to continue to live here is critically important. All right, ladies, all yours.
Thank you, Steve. What we know is the culture is the foundation of your practice. And as practice advisors, when we go into practices, the first thing we start with is the culture of your team. That's what we start working on with the teams that we work with. So you need to look at your culture and review it regularly. And we provide the culture guide. We provide a written guide to help our teams with their culture. So what our culture guide is, it's just that. It's a playbook for your culture. We know that it's a great system. It's a culture guide. So we know that you can help your team and you stay in line and keep your culture strong. And as a team member myself, I was a hygienist for many years, and thinking about culture, in looking back, I had a dentist I worked for in the 90s. It was the late 90s. And I thought about being a team member. I thought about my favorite job. And when I worked for him, I remember that I started out working one day a month for this new doctor, and he had a startup practice, and it was a small practice, and it was a little farther away, and it wasn't great money. And I loved working there. And I looked back and I thought, why did I love working there? And I wanted to work there. I started working more days for him. And I realized it was the appreciation. And he thanked me. He went out of his way. He would yell out the back door, "Thank you, Kelly." And it was a great culture. We had fun. You know, he was appreciative, and it wasn't the money, and it wasn't the big fancy equipment and stuff. It was the culture. So what we know is culture is the foundation of your practice, and it takes work. So we have the culture guide, we have a playbook, and we have tools to help you with that. So the 30-day action item is to review and develop your culture guide, create ideas to incorporate it daily, and change it up. If you've been doing the same thing, you can do something different with that as you go along. You can reach out to your practice advisor for help if needed, and you can look for different ways to incorporate that with your team. Now, Chris Taconis is going to look at the service value card. Chris?
Thanks, Kelly.
You're welcome.
With that, because we know that we're developing, just like Kelly said, working on a culture, cultivating a really healthy culture. There's a part to this that is equally important, and it's all about service values. So as a part of our TOPS team, we have a service values card that we've developed, and it highlights all of the values that we have in how we're going to serve you. Just like what we're doing, we want you to incorporate how you're going to create those service values that are important in serving your patients. So the team typically gets together, and again, it's something that your practice advisor can help you with. It's looking for all the areas of your practice in service of how you're going to take care of your patients. So for example, we work through our purpose, just like Robin was talking about regarding vision and values. We work through our purpose together and create that. We identify what our motto is. And a lot of you have a different motto. It's usually an internal thing. And of course, TOPS motto, happy to do it. You hear that all the time. So that's part of our mantra. We also look at our slogan. That's part of your service values, talking about what's most important to us, that it's a slogan of our organization. And we highlight the simple steps of service. So we go over all of those areas that we feel are important and need focus as a team of what we're going to identify will be giving great service to our clients. And it would be for you with your patients. So how you can do that is Crown Council actually has a format that we created to get you started, and your practice advisor, we can walk you through that with your team. It goes along with even getting it branded, printed, but most importantly, it's about implementing with your team so that everybody is really clear what your goal is on how you're going to serve patients. Now, how does that go after COVID-19 and we're getting back into the practice? Well, there's not going to be a change in how well you take care of your patients, obviously. It's going to be about where your focus lies and how we're going to look at perception and how to take great care of patients so they feel it in some different ways. I know that what's hugely beneficial for TOPS is every week when we meet together as a team, we review at least one of our service values, and we have this cool little card that we use, and one of us gets to choose a number of those service values, and we read it to the team as a great reminder about what our goal is in serving you, and we're recommending you do the same for you and your team.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. A couple of action items and thoughts. One, personal protective equipment can destroy your culture. Now, that probably sounds like heresy, but let me just highlight this. If everybody is masked up and gowned down, you don't have the benefit of nonverbal communication. We're taking away a lot of that. So the focus here is to emphasize with your team that culture now means more than ever before. We're going to have to work harder at taking care of each other and making sure communication is clear in an environment where we're going to be much more protected. So that's why, so the culture guide, critically important to remind everybody, culture stays intact and we're going to have to work harder on it than ever. One of the best examples I know of this is our own Pam Peterson, who leads our team. Every time we get together, the first thing we do is revisit values and we read over the entire culture guide. And I will admit, and I'm the guy who came up with this, I will admit every time she does it, I think, really? Do we have to go over this again? And the answer is yes, we have to go over it again. Repetition is the mother of learning, and it creates an environment where of self-analysis and accountability. So that is a key thing, especially now, more important than ever. So if you have never created your culture guide, this would be a great time to do it, and then to go back to your team as you ramp up and say, okay, this is the culture that we are committed to. So that is a key thing. Second thing, in terms of the service value card, there's a lot of aspects to that. One of my favorites is the simple steps of service. The 4 or 5 things that you do in every encounter with every patient. Things like smile. Well, guess that's off the table now. But things as simple as using their name in every encounter, right? In other words, there are simple things you can do in every encounter, and those may have changed, folks. They may have changed. If your simple steps of service were smile, shake their hand, I mean, we may have to revise those a little bit in a little different environment to say, what are the key things we can do in every encounter that will make a difference in terms of the way we serve our patients? So keep that in mind. Excellent opportunity to review those and then go back to your team with Culture Guide. And if nothing else, here's our simple steps of service. Every patient, every encounter, we will make sure that we do these key things that improve the relationship. All right, moving on. Area number 3 is your goals. And this takes on a little different context now. Is what are the short-term goals as well as, what are the long-term goals? So Tanya Bailey is going to lead us through the goal section.
All right, thank you. So with goals, there's not only goal setting, but there's execution of goals. And so at TOPS, we've identified key areas that are crucial to both the setting and the execution of the goals. So as Steve just mentioned, our first category is long-term goals. And that would involve not only your practice style, but your lifestyle, your diversification of services, even your diversification of productivity coming from your doctor category, your hygiene category, specialist production. Your collections, of course, is that big measure long-term for that first piece of goal setting. The second section is what we like to call 90-day sprints, or those short-term goals. And this is really where what's important now focus is going to be. As you are returning into your practice, setting some key goals that are going to be short-term to get revenue coming back into your practices. And we use a 3-step system for that. So you would identify the wildly important goal, and you really want to make sure that you identify 1 to 2 key things. As you've heard your coaches say for a long time now, the enemy of goal setting is setting too many goals. So you really want to identify, when you get back in practice, 1 or 2 key things that are a wildly important goal, and you have to define it and make it measurable. The next 2 pieces to that is setting up those lag measures, so lagging indicators that you can measure numerically, as well as those lead measures, which are going to be the things that you're doing every day, every week, that you're taking action on that creates results. And then the third step is creating accountability and making sure that things stay in place. Regular feedback from you to your team, from your team to you, so that you can modify and adjust as necessary. The last few areas on goal setting are keep score, scoreboards. We have a few different ways at TOPS that we support you with scoreboards, whether it's using a third-party application like Dental Intel, our TOPS stats, and of course your P&L is your ultimate scoreboard. And finally, your internal target board. This is where you're going to track all the way down to the action level and the procedural level, the things that you're doing. So in recap, those 5 areas are long-term goals, our 90-day sprints or short-term goals, our lag and lead measures, our scoreboards, and our target board. And our focus for what's important now is going to be those short sprints where we identify those 1 to 2 most important goals. And I would highly recommend that you get with your practice advisors to figure out what those are before you're seeing patients in, so you have a laser focus for both the implementation and the execution of those goals.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanya. Word picture, I've mentioned this before. Let me just reiterate it because there's some interesting psychology around this. And the word picture is the difference between the windshield and the rear view mirror. So when we are headed towards a storm on the horizon and you're looking out the windshield, it looks ominous and it looks horrible. And that is typically how we see things in the future, like we're going through right now, versus when you look in the rearview mirror in the past of things that have happened in the past, we tend to forget about all the trauma. When we look back at 2008, now 12 years later, it's like, well, you know, we made it. We made it through that. But when we were going through it, it seemed like the world was coming to an end like it is now. So the point being is there is now a huge, huge difference between the long term and the short term. What are we trying to accomplish today versus what is the long-term goal? Both are important. The focus for the team right now is what are our goals for the next 90 days? What are we going to do how do we schedule? What is it that we're trying to accomplish for the next 90 days? That may be different than the 90 days after that. But the focus is, what are we trying to do right now? Patient retention, get people back on track, figure out where the patient base is going. There's a lot of things that are going to have to be figured out in the short term. So the focus for the goals, 90 days. We call it a 90-day sprint. What's the plan for May, June, and July, or June, July, and August, whatever the time period is? Here's where our focus is going to be. All right, section number 4 has to do with team accountability. And Mary Beth Brown is going to walk us through this. I mentioned this briefly in the introduction. The temptation is going to be to want to schedule like crazy, which is good. And our recommendation is you decide right now what your accountability system is going to be around the meetings that you will hold. Your morning meeting, your weekly meeting. Mary Beth's going to walk us around this because it is the glue that is going to keep everybody together. So, Mary Beth?
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, team, for all the supporting information you've supplied. Because every piece that we've just talked about so far this morning, vision, values, culture, and goals, are such a big piece of the next section, which is team accountability, right? If you don't plan to inspect, don't expect to get anything back, right? And with sports being such a great analogy, and Steve set the stage, which is the temptation is to take off the table something that needs to be protected as much as your production blocks for high production procedures. Your meeting time should hold equal, if not greater value, so that you can do the things you love to do in harmony with your team. And there's a famous mantra that says, if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So that urge that you might have to be productive and work in the practice versus on the practice needs to be held at bay. And the first thing that we're going to do is go through several different types of meetings. Our team has come together and chosen what we feel to be as the big 3 wins for you and your practice. However, after we've given you our guidance, you can decide to do some, none, or all of everything that we've talked about, or which you feel the best 3 would be. So there are from micro meetings all the way to, the Hubble telescope and perspectives, and each has an important place. We start with a morning meeting because it handles the details of the day. What's the most important thing you can do today? From that, we have always recommended that we have weekly meetings as a group to come together and work on skills or specific systems that need our immediate attention. From there, we talk about meeting monthly, a little longer meeting, so that you can then dive deeper deep dive to do some really retooling and retraining, utilizing the strengths within your team, finding out who the most successful is and helping train the weakest link to be the most successful person on your team or to implement a new system into your practice. We highly recommend quarterly meetings to even deep digger, or to, I think I said that backwards, to dive deeper into specific areas of growth. Most of you spend those quarterly meetings with a coach at that meeting so that you can then step back and not be the player or the leader of the team captain at that time, and actually grow and be part of the training process as well. We highly recommend that if you're not a solo practitioner and that you have partners in your practice, whether they be associates or actually physical business partners, that you have partner meetings regularly so that you can keep on step with your partners and your associates within the practice. We talk about every year having an annual meeting with your team to set the tone, to establish the goals, to celebrate the victories from the past, and to move forward to grow your practice. And then the other component that we highly recommend is the Kaizen.
Oh, I think we lost Mary
An
Beth.
action plan. Did we lose me?
Yeah, just for a second, we had a little bit of a hiccup in the connection there.
I guess everybody in Houston must be online. What do you think? So the Kaizen action plan is such an important integrity piece of accountability from each one of the specific meetings that I discussed, because they allow you to write down that personal commitment, will you do it, and the follow-up for the next meeting that you'll be at. So the win of all of those meetings that I discussed that our team came up with for you at the present would be morning opportunity meetings, of course. Can't start the day without one. I don't know how one would do that anyway. Weekly meetings, monthly meetings, and the strategy and the structure are within the systems of each one of those. If you do not currently have agendas in play for the wins that we just outlined, I would highly recommend reaching out to your advisor and or the top support team if you don't have an advisor, for an opportunity to copy Genius, so that you can be prepped and ready to go for your meetings. And the action will be, will you do it?
Got it. Thanks, Mary Beth.
So thank you, Steve. Did I leave anything out?
Perfect. So the reinforcement when you sit down with your team to ramp back up is to emphasize the importance of morning meeting every day. In some cases, for the first week or two, you may need 2, one at the beginning of the day and one at the end of the day. There's a lot of things that are going to have to be vetted and discussed and worked on. So the importance of, we will have a morning meeting every day. It's critically important that everybody be early so that we can have a well-structured, productive meeting. And we will sit down for a minimum of an hour once a week to go over and work on the practice, right? So just reinforcing the importance of that. That's the glue. That's the accountability. Now, let me just remind everybody of 4 critical leadership issues, characteristics that we have talked about for years. So those of you that have been through Leadership Academy year over year, repetition is good. 4 things, especially when it has to do with your meetings. To be present, meaning not just physically present, but you've got to be mentally and emotionally present when you're in those meetings. Morning meeting, weekly meeting, be 100% present. Number 2, and this is critically important right now, is to be transparent. Everybody's going through a different emotional roller coaster on all this, and it's okay to be transparent, to say, you know what, this is kind of what I'm feeling and I'm working through it. And I know a lot of you are working through the same things, but be transparent about what's really going on. Associated with that, 3rd thing is to be honest. You don't have to have all the answers. And you can let your team know that you're going to work on it and what the commitment is and where you're going. And then number 4 is, as the leader, to have a plan, right? So you don't have to have the answers to it, but you can have a plan to get the plan. Meaning if there's something that comes up and you don't have the answer, then let's put together the strategy to get the answer we need to move forward, right? So those 4 things: be present, be transparent, be honest, and finally to have a plan or put the pieces in place to get the plan. So that has everything to do with that team accountability in those meetings on a regular basis. We view it as the glue, especially right now when we're navigating uncharted waters. All right, number 5 is team management. In other words, how are you going to do the individual managing of your team? So Tanya Bailey is going to walk us through some specifics of team management right now. Tanya?
Thank you, Steve. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is that team management often is addressed when it's urgent rather than when it's important. And there is no better time than now with a reboot to take a look at this piece of your playbook so that you can be prepared moving forward in the future and manage these issues when they're important rather than when they're urgent. So let me give you kind of an overview. There's about 7 sections to this. So to give you some bullet points, number 1 is an organizational chart with roles and responsibilities. And I don't mean just task lists, but actual results-focused job descriptions. So our second section is actually having job position playbooks that not only talk about what needs to be done, but what are the expected results from each individual position. And your hiring strategy. Create the position that you want and hire the person for the position, not work a position into the person that you hired. So creating a hiring strategy, creating the positions, having screening questions, and interview format. The next section is your new employee onboarding system. Having an actual system for bringing new employees into the organization. Over the many years in dentistry as both a team member and a coach, I have seen numerous occasions of sink or swim onboarding. So having an actual onboarding system with 30, 60, and 90-day benchmarks, this is your opportunity to build the position, if you will, that you want, rather than constantly trying to make it work. One of the crucial things, and I think even now, this is even more important, is to make sure that you have those passwords set up on your practice management software for all of your team members, because this gives you a really crucial ability to track and to hold people accountable for performance. Your quarterly review schedule and format is really important. Again, reviews tend to come up in urgent situations when you've decided that you're done with somebody. Our philosophy has always been give regular feedback so that there are no surprises. So a review schedule is not about a raise, it's about giving performance feedback. And really, hopefully 98% of the time, it's an applause session that you're sharing all the things about what that team member is doing that you love. And in the event alignment gets out of place, having a discussion forum process so that you can have documented feedback. And finally, our win, which is what's important now, is your employee handbook. Having a guideline for everything that's expected of your employees, both behaviorally and policy-wise. There's that dirty word, policy. And make sure that you always have current updates. Your employee handbook is not something that your friend on the Crown Council Network gave you. It is something that you have customized for your practice based on your state guideline. And one of the things that I love is we have some great resources to help you with that. You want to also update the employee handbook on a very regular basis. Probably the max would be about every 24 months. So if you think back to Steve's reboot button, there is no better time than right now to take the two of these things, the new employee onboarding system and the employee handbook, and go back and reboot your practice. This is basically like an opportunity to have a fresh start, even with the team members that you had before, because this is going to be a new business. There will not be a go back to yesterday. This is a fresh start. Now is the time to take advantage of that fresh start. So just a quick recap, team management. Remember, we lead people and we manage these tasks. So the processes that you're going to manage are your organizational chart with roles and responsibilities based on results, a hiring strategy, a new employee onboarding system, a quarterly review schedule and format, a discussion process, and a written legal employee handbook based on your state laws. Steve?
All right, so again, the focus here in terms of sitting down with your team, what we're suggesting here is that, you take out your employee handbook and you review with your team key elements of that you want to remind them of that need to be kept in place. The psychological challenge here is that when things change, many times the temptation is to think that everything has changed, and everything has not changed, right? All the rules did not go out the window. So reviewing some of those key things in your employee manual handbook to remind everybody what the rules of the game are so that everybody's on the same page, it merits some discussion and some review. So while you have the time, it might be, what we're suggesting is go through, review your employee manual. Are there things that need to be updated, clarified, and again, roll that out again. Maybe not in its entirety, but the specific areas that need reinforcement. All right, section 6 is your clinical systems. This is going to be critically important, especially as it has to do with infection control. So Kelly Hemrich is going to walk us through some areas of focus for this in terms of where you get your team back on board and what you focus on. Kelly?
Thank you, Steve. In thinking about your clinical systems playbook, there are a few important things to remember. Your systems they should be duplicatable. They are objective, not subjective. They should be clear and concise. you shouldn't get overwhelmed with the amount of systems that you need to create. A few plays are better than none. And we know, we looked at all of the systems, and we narrowed it down to about 3 that you should focus on at this time. And we thought that you need to look at medical history update. So thinking about when you go back to seeing patients and thinking about the medical history update, who will be doing that? The screening, the questions, who will be doing that? Where will they be doing that? How will they be doing that? What information will they be gathering? Where will they be putting that information? How will we know how to access that information? So the medical history update information is the first piece of that system for your playbook. The second piece is the OSHA and infection control. We don't know yet what the CDC, what that information will be. Mary Beth discussed in leadership this second session. It's been a while since we've had updates. What will the enhancements be to what we are already doing? How will we roll that out with our team? We highly recommend that you do a run through with your team. You're going to practice. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? What's it going to look like? And what are we going to need to add to our playbook so that we can play the game? And like Robin said before, how are we going to communicate to our patients so that they feel safe and they know that we are doing what's best for them and our team? So the second piece is the OSHA and infection control. The third piece is equipment maintenance. We've probably never had a time in our career that we've been shut down for this long. So what do we need to do before we get back and start going again? What equipment needs to be maintained and what needs to be done? What new equipment do we need to add into that rotation? What new equipment needs to be learned? Who's going to do that? How's that going to look? So in playing the game, who will be doing that? How's it going to look? What's our playbook going to be, and how are we going to practice? So the 3 areas we're going to look at are medical history update, infection control, and equipment maintenance. So we can be confident and we can make our team and patients feel safe when we return. Anything else, Steve?
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. One just quick reminder for all of you that have been through the No More Hygiene course. The correct question for medical history update is not, have there been any changes in your medical history? You never, ever ask that question, because the default answer is no. So the appropriate question is, what changes have there been in your medical history since we saw you last? What physicians have you seen? What medications have you changed? What sicknesses have you had? In other words, it's an open-ended question. What changes have there been? We'll see where the protocol, will have a discussion about this in more detail next week. We anticipate that one of the things that you're going to want to incorporate is taking a patient's temperature when they come in. We've always done the blood pressure thing in the past. Taking their temperature now may be a thing that we do in the future. So there's going to be some things that will be added to the mix in terms of patient safety, team safety, infection control. So those 3 areas are the what's important now: medical history update, infection control protocol, and equipment maintenance, and bringing all that back on board. All right, thank you, Kelly. Section number 7, which you may think has no place right now, but we believe it has a critical place, which is marketing, your messaging. What is it that your patients are going to see? So our marketing whiz, Chris Taconis, is going to walk us through what's important now as far as marketing.
So, I feel so strongly about how important this is. I know our whole team agrees. One of the biggest things that we really had a huge focus on is walking you all through what to say, what to do regarding communicating with your current patients, as well as what to put out there on social media so that patients don't think that your doors are boarded up, that you're still seeing patients and you're still there for them and there to support them. So yes, marketing is still going to be a key element as you return to your practice so that we can help you get you in thrive mode versus survive mode. So one of the key things that we recommend in the first 30 days is focus on your referral strategy. Really making sure that we're still asking for referrals. You are going to be noticed more now than you've ever been noticed before. And that's in all the things that you're going to be doing to take excellent care of your patients, following protocols and guidelines that you and your team understand need to happen at that point. And, putting the service values and the culture into play, focusing on where your patients are coming from. And I know a lot of you have actually gotten great referrals from the emergency patients that you've been seeing that haven't been yours over the last 2 months or 30 plus days. So really having a strategy, even having some sort of internal incentive with the team about what can we do to really utilize this time to get referrals from patients that are saying, thank you so much for taking care of me in an emergency and for responding to me while everyone else's doors were closed. So put together a strategy so that you can really maximize how you're getting referrals. Also, we still want to make sure that you're active in social media, checking to see what avenues you're using in social media and being there all the time. A lot of you have done a great job at communicating well with your patients through social media, whether it's posting something really positive on Facebook every day or connecting through patients one-on-one through texting or leaving a video of some sort on your webpage. This is going to be a huge period of time that everybody's gone to social media to communicate for so long right now. It's the only way we can feel the human touch, so to speak. So this is a perfect time for you to come up with another strategy of what are we going to do moving forward to really stay connected with our patients and to help inform people about what we're doing to take measures in order to take great care of them. And those are the two areas that we think that you should focus on the most of what's important now in the next 30 days.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris. There's a lot to consider there in terms of the whole strategy, what you're doing online, your website, your social media, all of those things have been disrupted to a certain degree. And those are the critical areas for starters that we recommend. All right, section number 8 is your business systems. We had a whole session of Leadership Academy dedicated to scheduling, which is, again, critically important. And that's part of your business systems as well as a number of other areas. So Robin Tyson is going to walk us through what your focus is in terms of business systems. Robin?
Thanks, Steve. The business systems is a really robust area of your playbook and covers quite a few different things. Just as Steve said, one of the major things that it does cover is your scheduling. And we covered this in session 5 and talked all about the key things were staying in touch with your patients and reaching them by phone and making sure that you have that relationship with your patients. And then also keeping in place your blocks, making sure that the schedule that you have when you come back is going to be repeatable, especially for hygiene patients in the different increments of time. So the 3 or 6 months recare intervals that they come in, is your schedule repeatable? And then having a list of patients that the current active patients that haven't been able to get in that time, use those to be able to backfill your schedule, knowing that you want to keep those blocks in place and make sure that you can be productive as well, getting patients back in. So scheduling is a big part of your business systems. Some of the other areas that we covered in session 6 are patient forms. So just as Kelly was talking about with medical history, that may change. Those forms are part of your business system. It would include your new patient forms, your medical history, your dental history, all those would fall under that. And again, we talked about that in session 6. And then also financial arrangements, your internal and external guidelines. We introduced in session 6 a more patient-friendly way to introduce financial guidelines. And so that would be all a part of your business system. The Easy Pay form, we talked about that. That would be another business system that falls under those financial arrangements. And then your third-party financing resources. As patients start coming back in with the economy and the state that it is, with jobs, insurance, and limbo, some of these things, having some resources for patients to be able to afford dentistry is going to be an important piece of that. So in session 6, we provided you with a list of several different resources for third-party financing to choose within your office and be able to have at least 3 options for your patients there. Another business system is accounts receivable. So what's your collections protocol? How often do your statements go out? What's the process in which you use to follow up on past due balances? That all falls under accounts receivable. You have insurance and claims management. So how often do your claims go out? What are the narratives that are used for those? What are the x-rays and different things that are attached with those, so you only have to handle it once and send them out? And if you haven't received anything back from an insurance company in 21 days, what's your process to follow up on those claims so you don't have claims that are going into that 30-day late period, and you're able to stay on top of that and collect your money in a timely manner. The next piece is the 5-point daily checklist. This was something that we covered in session 2. And the 5-point daily checklist looks at how you look at your activity and everything that's happened within your practice within the day. So we talked about audit trails, being able to look at your adjustments. There were 5 different areas of that. So that is another one of our what's important now. If you don't have a system in place to check those right now, what are you going to do to get that in place before you return to practice on, in the coming months or coming weeks, hopefully. The next session is patient payment posting. So having consistency in what categories your payments fall under, and also adjustments, and using the Easy Pay form, collecting for balances, having notes that every team member can follow to know why there would be a credit balance or why there would be a balance on an account, to be able to follow that, making sure that there's consistency in those notes in your ledger. A business supply budget. So this is often overlooked. What are the costs that are incurred for the different supplies that are coming in and using in your business team? Where are the areas of opportunity there, and who's monitoring those? And then the last piece of it is the reports review process. So Mary Beth talked about having different meetings. One of the things that falls under this is there's daily, weekly, and monthly suggested reports that are run. How many of those are getting run in your office, and what are you doing to review those to make sure if there are adjustments that need to be made, that you do those in a timely manner. So those are the 10 areas of the business system. And again, the way the win that we look at now is that scheduling component and making sure you have a plan when you go back, and then that 5-point daily checklist to be able to check your activity. Anything I missed, Steve?
Perfect. We've talked about the 5-point daily checklist for years. And I know it's kind of like flossing. It's not everybody's most favorite thing to do. And now would be the perfect time to put that in place as a daily habit. So you make sure everything stays where it is supposed to stay, and it creates a check and balance. So let me just give you one piece of sage advice that's not from me, but from one of the most financially wise people that I know. We have a controller that almost none of you have ever met. He stays very much in the background, and he is a very, very seasoned financial accountant and controller. He spent an entire career doing this for very large companies, and we're grateful to have him. When I brought him on board, he said to me, he said, I will agree to take this position under one condition. And I said, all right, what's the condition? He said that you adopt this belief and behavior. I said, okay, what is it? He said, never, ever trust your accountant. And I said, wait a minute, you're the accountant, you're the bookkeeper. He said, exactly. He said, never put me in a position where you have to go on trust alone, because when you do that, you're putting me, meaning him, in a compromised position. It's not fair to me. So he said, everything that we're going to do, there will be a check and balance. So you never have to wonder if everything is. He said, it will always be very, very clear, but don't you ever put me in a position where you have to trust me, which I thought was wise advice. So I think that's a great words to live by. In other words, we think that when you trust a team member, that's a good thing. But when you think about it, it's a disservice when you have to operate on trust alone. That means you're putting them in a position where they may have to defend themselves, and that's not fair. So that 5-point daily checklist is designed for checks and balances, so you never have to wonder, and they are always protected. So that might merit some explanation. If you haven't ever put that in place or you're going to put it back in place, it's for their protection as much as it is for yours. But don't ever put them in a position where you go on trust alone. All right. Thank you, Robin. Section number 9 is patient service. And this has everything to do with how you serve your patients, verbal skills systems. And Tanya Bailey is going to walk us through patient service.
All right. Thank you again, Steve. Obviously, this section is going to be near and dear to the hearts of everyone on our team, because this really is summed up in a whole 2-day seminar called Total Immersion. So the what's important now, without going deep into the 20 different sections of this playbook, the what's important now would be, like any great sports team, they review their playbook often and they update it. In fact, I've never been a professional sports player, but we watch a lot of sports in our house when they're on, that is. And what I know is that right now would have been the beginning of the baseball season. And if we had been able to be at spring training with those players, we would have seen them going back to the basics. Now, these guys are roughly age, maybe 18, 19 to, I think we got some players even into their 40s nowadays. And what's fascinating to me is no matter how long they've played the game, they start back with the basics. And those basics, if you've not been through Total Immersion in the last year, I'd highly recommend getting with our team. And I know that's a shameless plug, but getting with our team, because it's a whole review for everything that you're going to find in this section of your playbook. And your Total Immersion binder is this section of your practice playbook. So I'm going to highlight 3 of the many things that we go over in Total Immersion that I would recommend to be your primary focus when you get back to your practice. And I know all of the rest of the practice advisors would agree with me here. Number 1, we talk a lot about asking questions. Ask, 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 ask. And the number 1 skill you need when you go back to your practice that you need to brush up on isn't asking, it's listening. Because your patients have been at home with their families, and in many cases, nobody else. They're going to be looking for someone to talk to. And our 3 levels of listening is a skill that takes constant practice. Just like if I were a baseball player, I'd be practicing hitting and catching and running. So the 3 levels of listening, I would highly recommend getting on to the skill of the week or going back to our prior sessions over the last 7 weeks and on those listening skills. The other 2 areas of a what's important now focus are going to be divided up between your new patients and your existing patients. So for your new patients, it is the patient relationship form. Now, we may have to modify how we use that form, whether it's a paper version or a laminated version or a digital version. But in whatever format we use, the core of it will never change. And that is understanding what your patients really want. So on the front side of that form, make sure that from a systems update, a playbook update, that you've identified who fills it out and where it's kept, where you can keep track of it for easy retrieval. We recommend 31-day expandable folder. Making sure that new patient relationship form comes to every morning opportunity meeting, and that the person who took the call shares the primary interest and primary concern. And most importantly, that the doctor uses that information for those new patient calls the day prior. And let us not forget that there is a back side to that form, which is just as or more important than the front side. You see, the front side was just a setup. It was just getting the runner to first base. The back side is going to drive that runner in. This is where we score. So the backside is for all new patients, whether they come through hygiene or the doctor's schedule. And this is our system for finding out what matters most. Even in times of crisis, if we don't understand what matters most to our patients, our case acceptance is going to go down. It has never been more important than now to make sure you have a system for this. And then you also want to scan and keep it with the rest of the patient paperwork so that you can always reference back to it. And you want to make sure that you're documenting these findings somewhere in your practice management system and not buried in clinical notes. You can keep it in the clinical notes, but this information needs to be accessible for easy retrieval for anybody who's going to interact with that patient, from the telephone to in person and after the fact. So what's important now? Front and back side of that new patient relationship form. For your existing patients, what you are going to want to focus on first thing are those conversion exams. So a conversion exam is simply the emotional interview that you do on an existing patient that takes them back and treats them like they're a new patient all over again, just like you did on the backside of that new patient relationship form. Now, historically, we've always recommended that you identify 2 patients per day at your morning meeting for this. And knowing that our patients are going to be coming back into our practices, it's been a while since they've been in, maybe even an extended time, and it may have been a while since they've been in public. Make sure that you're taking time to have this conversation with as many patients who need it. I'm going to go back to the culture guide that Kelly talked about early. And one of the tenets on the culture guide is about treating people, not teeth. And sometimes our patients' needs go on their mouths. And this conversion exam is an opportunity to have that conversation. So you'll use what we call our SWOT formula, and your practice advisor can help you revisit that and go back through that. Document that primary concern and M&M, and then always lead with the urgency formula with their M&M when recommending treatment. So in summary, you are a winning sports team. You're going to use your playbook, your case acceptance playbook from TOPS, and your 3 what's important now focuses are listening, using our 3 levels of listening skill, using the front and the back side of that new patient relationship form for all of your new patients, and using that conversion exam for your existing patients.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanya. So here's, just as a recap of this, here's a food for thought. And the whole purpose of this reboot discussion is to help the team recognize the difference between being in survival mode and being in sustainability mode. 90%, we view that 90% of the practices, without thinking, are going to operate in survival mode, meaning everything's going to go out the window, everybody's going to be armed up, and it's going to be a transactional experience. That's survival mode. What we're suggesting here is sustainability mode. What do we need to be doing today to move through this and have a sustainable practice and a business model where patients will repeat and refer and leave great reviews and do the things that we know we need to have a great practice. So again, are you going to be in survival mode or sustainability mode? And this is all about sustainability and operating in a way that is sustainable. All right, so last area, number 10, has to do with financial management. And let me simplify this with a word picture. I got in my truck on Sunday, and my dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. I had 3 different alerts, red stuff flashing all over the place, and I couldn't figure it out because I've been home like the rest of you. I've been home for the last month, and my truck's been parked in my garage. I've gone out a little bit, but very, very little. So the dashboard, right? It says, check the ABS system, check the brake system, check this. So in the past, when that's happened, I've always gone to AutoZone, and the AutoZone guy comes out with his little handheld computer and he plugs it in under the dash, and that computer does an entire search, and then it gives detailed data of all of the alerts that are on my dashboard. So I went by my local mechanic, and I actually dropped the truck off yesterday, and he called me within about an hour, and he gave me the rundown of everything that was going on in detail. Now, that all started with what showed up on the dashboard. So what we're recommending here is that for the next 90 days, once you get back online, that you have a very simple daily dashboard with what matters right now, what's important now. Now, that may lead to a deeper dive when you see some alerts on your dashboard, but this is going to be a 90-day dashboard. You're going to decide what's on that dashboard, but it will be things that you look at every day, the results that you look at every day. Could I suggest some things that you might want to have on that dashboard? Number 1 is your schedule. We've said this over and over. The temptation is going to be for your team to just schedule wherever. And our recommendation has been stick with your block scheduling. So managing that process and looking at the schedule, not just the day of, but look at what the schedule looks like tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and how that's building. That's going to be a critical part of your dashboard. Production. Part of your 5-point daily checklist is the provider report to make sure that everything you did got billed out and got coded for. So what did you actually produce? What did you actually collect? And a big part of that collection is patient portion. So were all the patient portions collected today so that you don't create an accumulating AR problem? So those would be just a few simple examples. There are more that you might want to include on your daily dashboard for your 90-day sprint, the things that matter most that you're going to want to keep an eye on. All right, so those are just some suggestions. That whole area is deep. And I don't know, for example, for many of you, what your habit has been in terms of looking at your practice financials. We recommend that you look at your P&L and your balance sheet every month. That's a habit, right? And that's a whole nother discussion, but there's all kinds of different pieces that go into the financial management part of it, but that's our focus. 90-day dashboard, daily review, and that'll lead you to other things that you might want to take a look at. All right, we have gone through 10 areas. Let me review those real quick. And again, the format for this is you're going to sit down with your team before you get back online. So this might be a few days before you get back on, but you're going to do the prep work now. So vision and values was category number 1. What matters most right now? What's important now? Your culture. Team accountability. What's your meeting agenda? What's your meeting format going to be? Team management, right? What are the things you're going to have in place for managing your individual team members? Clinical systems. What's important now for protective equipment, for infection control, all the clinical systems now. Marketing, which is your messaging, what you're going to focus on right now, your business systems, including scheduling and financial arrangements, your 5-point daily checklist. Number 9 is patient service. What are the key areas for patient service and verbal skills? And then finally, financial management. What's your 90-day dashboard going to look like? So 10 areas. That's a comprehensive look then to sit down with your team with a plan, short plan in each one of those areas so they understand what the roadmap is, where you're going, and what the expectations are as you come back online. So our hope is that addressing this right now gives you the time now over the next couple of weeks. Again, start times are going to vary across the country, and we realize that. There are some, it appears, that'll be able to come back online in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Some may be longer than that. But while you have the time is to revisit each of those 10 areas, map out what's important now in each one of those, and then build out your presentation for your team so that you can sit down, retrain, reboot, and have the equivalent of spring training if we were in baseball, right? So that's your plan. That's your assignment, is to build all those out. Our team, of course, is happy to help in any way, shape, or form to provide the detail in each of those areas. All right, let me give you just some heads up. Next Leadership Academy, next Tuesday, a week from today, 11 a.m. Central Time. And our focus, as I mentioned before, it's all going to be about infection control and personal protective equipment. We will have a discussion. So please come prepared so that you can discuss. There are going to be some areas here that are not clear cut. And so our design here is to have a discussion, share ideas, and work together on what this looks like. No More Hygiene online coming up next week, April 29th and 30th. You can actually register online or give our team a call. We'll be happy to help with that. The response to that has been huge. We did one. We're going to do another one because of the demand. So it's a great time to get your team trained in that system. We will have, just so you know, you will see an announcement for a Crown Council webinar on Thursday entitled Out of the Crisis. And it will contain a lot of the things, a sample of some of the things that we have talked about over the last 7 sessions of Leadership Academy. And we encourage you to join that because it'll be a great review, as well as we'll have some additional information as well. So thanks for joining us. I hope that was a productive, useful 90 minutes for everybody. Your assignment is to develop your plan and come up with your wins, what's important now in each of those 10 areas that we've talked about, so you can bring your team back on strong. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Feel free to reach out to us. We will be looking forward to being back with you next Tuesday, 11 o'clock Central Time, mastermind format. Bring your ideas. Be ready to discuss PPE and infection control. Look forward to having you with us. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.